Welcome to the In the Course Show. I'm your host, Mr. B. Today we have a very exciting show for you. We are trying to uncover the real reason why Donald Trump decided to essentially capture the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife. Now, I know what's been said on the news is because Nicolas Maduro is a drug trafficker. He is the head of a drug distribution ring that is essentially poisoning and killing the lives of many people. But there's more to the story. There is always narratives that's created whenever there's conflict because the person creating the narrative wants to persuade the public to think about something in a certain way. And sometimes the answers aren't always clear if you have to sift through said narratives to determine what is true and what isn't. I've been doing some research on it because it is pretty compelling to me as to why Trump would do that. I mean, he did campaign on not being a president that would try to police the world, but an America First president. And I think what's happened is that, Trump has been convinced by some of his advisors that he needs to consider America's interests. And so sometimes those interests are not things that is openly discussed in the public sphere. And so it was interesting to me to sort of do some research around what are some of the things happening in the background that is not in the public eye that can contribute to the decision that was made by Trump to capture Maduro and to essentially overtake the Venezuelan country. Obviously, it's been framed a certain way, but I think this piece that I found by this YouTuber, try to see his name, they do extremely good work. I think it's called WW2 Legacy is the name of the channel. And they did a really, really good job of breaking down the core dynamics behind this. So without any further ado, let's jump right into his presentation as to what's actually happening and the numbers that supports the real reason why Trump attacked Maduro and subdued Venezuela in the fashion that he did.
Digital UAN holdings. 48 hours later, at 0200 Venezuelan time on January 1st, 2026, at precisely midnight Beijing time, China activated interest-bearing functionality for digital UAN holdings. 48 hours later, at 0200 Venezuelan time on January 3rd, the United States executed Operation Absolute Resolve, 150-plus aircraft, the capture of a sitting president, and the largest naval deployment in modern Western Hemisphere history. Coincidence? While mainstream media sold you the terrorism narrative, the ledger tracked something far more significant. By December 2025, Venezuela had eliminated the US dollar from 99% of its oil transactions. We're talking about 746,000 barrels per day flowing to China, settled in Tether cryptocurrency, Chinese yuan, and debt swap mechanisms. Zero. The world's largest proven oil reserves, 303 billion barrels, had officially exited the petrodollar system.
So it's important to note that there's a timeline of every event that took place that led into the invasion of Venezuela. And so these are all verifiable events that's taken place and the cause of the military intervention.
And the United States responded with military force. Before we continue, subscribe to the Gray Ledger. We track the data the mainstream ignores to give you the financial truth. Hit that notification bell. You're going to want to see what we uncovered. Ladies and gentlemen, your AG, the Asian guy, the ledger is open. Let me show you what really happened in the final months of 2025. Pull up the trade data with me. November 2025, Venezuela's oil exports peaked at 951,000 barrels per day. By December, following the U.S. blockade announcement, that number collapsed to approximately 500,000 barrels per day. But here's what matters. Before that collapse, 80% of Venezuela's exports were flowing to China. We're talking about 746,000 barrels per day in November alone. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Look at how they were paying for it. By December 2025, state oil company PDVSA was collecting approximately 80% of its oil revenue in Tether, USDT, not dollars, not UAN directly, cryptocurrency. Do the math with me. Venezuela's daily oil revenue in November 2025, roughly $50 to $60 million per day, based on $746,000 barrels at $65 to $80 per barrel. That's $18 to $20 billion annually at peak production. And 80% of that, let's be conservative and say 40 million per day, was being collected in a dollar-pegged stablecoin that operates completely outside the traditional US banking system. Why does this matter? 3 strategic advantages that should terrify every dollar defender. First, sanctions evasion. USDT bypassed traditional banking systems subject to US Treasury oversight. No SWIFT, no correspondent banks, no intermediary that the United States could freeze or pressure. Second, immediate settlement. Cryptocurrency eliminated the multi-day delays of traditional wire transfers. More importantly, it eliminated the risk of funds being frozen mid-transaction, a risk that had become very real for anyone trading with sanctioned entities. Third, anonymity. Blockchain obfuscation techniques hid the ultimate beneficiaries. Venezuelan government authorized banks and exchange houses converted USDT to believe hours for domestic use, but the trail from Chinese buyers through intermediaries to Venezuelan accounts, nearly impossible to track in real time. The timeline tells you everything. PDVSA began experimenting with USDT in 2023. By Q1 2024, they required new clients to use digital wallets in USDT for spot deals. By July 2024, Venezuela's central bank was selling $119 million in cryptocurrencies to the private sector monthly. By December 2025, 80% adoption. But cryptocurrency wasn't the only weapon in Venezuela's derization arsenal. Since 2017, Venezuela officially priced oil in Chinese yuan rather than US dollars. Read that again. The first major oil producer to systematically abandon dollar pricing. The Ministry of Petroleum listed weekly closing prices in yuan 306.26 yuan per barrel equivalent to 46.70, not as a secondary option, as the official price. Settlement operated through 3 channels. Channel 1, SIPS, China's cross-border interbank payment system. By 2022, SIPS connected 300 to 800 plus banks across 103 countries. This isn't some experimental network. This is operational infrastructure that processes real transactions for real money, completely bypassing SWIFT. Channel 2, direct bilateral payment infrastructure. Established payment channels between Venezuelan and Chinese state banks. No intermediaries, no exposure to Western financial oversight. Channel 3, oil for loans framework. Since 2007, China extended over $60 billion to Venezuela. By December 2025, approximately $12 billion remained outstanding. Instead of cash repayments, Venezuela committed to delivering crude directly to Chinese entities as debt service. Look at the structure. China Development Bank loans, pre-agreed prices, large volume commitments, $0 exposure. Then there's Chevron, the sole U.S. oil company operating in Venezuela under general license 41A and 41B. Even Chevron utilized a debt for oil mechanism. 50% of joint venture production went to Chevron as compensation for unpaid debts to PDVSA. The critical detail, 0 direct cash payments, 0 taxes, 0 royalties to the Maduro government. In November 2025, Chevron exported 150,000 barrels per day to U.S. refineries. All debt compensation, not $1 changed hands. And finally, the oldest trade mechanism reimagined for modern sanctions, evasion, barter. Venezuela imported 419,000 barrels of Russian naphtha in November 2025, essential for diluting extra heavy Orunco crude into exportable grades, payment direct commodity exchange. Let me give you the breakdown of Venezuela's payment infrastructure in December 2025.
Okay, for those who are not really following along, because there is a lot of information, it sounds like what he's saying is that Venezuela was setting up a separate payment system that bypassed the SWIFT system that the U.S. controls. The term used is de-dollaration. Essentially, the way the U.S. controls the financial system is the dollar is the basis that's supported by oil for all transactions to take place between countries. And so the way the U.S. can punish countries that they feel is not in good standing is by placing sanctions or restrictions on their ability to do global trade with other countries. So if you de-dollarize your country where you're not dependent on having to use the system that the US set up, in order to do trade and in order to transact with other countries, then you're bypassing the US, thereby diminishing the US's ability to have power over you and your decisions. So what he's explaining is the various facets of how payments was being structured to bypass the US dollarization process system that's currently in play and widely used by virtually all the countries in the world. So what Venezuela was doing, along with China and Russia, was creating some sort of a barter system, a new payment system through cryptocurrency and other means, to not have to rely on doing trade with the dollarization process, but to do it without exchanging dollars, essentially. So they were creating another avenue to transact in the world, where they were making money, transacting business with countries that the US had deemed as being barred from doing business, like the Russias and certain Chinese entities. And the US obviously was noticing that, and in their interest, this was a violation because you're leaving the system they set up for you to transact. And thereby, they can't control it anymore. They can't put a sanction on a country that doesn't care because they have another way around it. So for that reason, the US took other measures to address that process. Now, they created narratives around why this was this morally necessary thing for them to do, but the real reason has everything to do with this.
Right before the US strike. USDT cryptocurrency, 70, 80% of total revenue. Chinese yuan direct settlements, 10, 15% oil for debt mechanisms, 5 to whom 10% barter and goods exchange, 5% US dollars, approximately 1%. 1%. Venezuela took the world's largest proven oil reserves and eliminated the dollar from 99% of transactions. Now let's talk about why this triggered a military response on January 1st, 2026. I need you to remember this date. China activated interest-bearing functionality for digital yuan holdings. Prior to this, ECNY functioned as digital cash. After January 1st, it became digital deposit money. This is the financial equivalent of upgrading from a simple checking account to a full-service investment vehicle. You could now earn interest on UN-denominated assets used for oil trade settlements. The timing is not coincidental. Look at what was happening to the yuan in late December 2025. On December 24th, offshore yuan broke through the 7.0 per dollar barrier for the first time in 15 months, touching 6.999. For the full year 2025, the yuan appreciated 4 to 5% against the dollar, the largest annual gain since 2020. Simultaneously, Project and Bridge, China's multi-central bank digital currency platform, reached minimum viable product status. By March 2025, 23 central banks had actively joined digital currency bridge testing. The participating central banks included the People's Bank of China, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Bank of Thailand, Central Bank of UAE, and critically, Saudi Arabia. Let me explain why mBridge represents an existential threat to dollar dominance. Transaction speed days reduced to seconds. Cost reduction potentially hauled had from traditional 1 to 3% fees. Middle Eastern energy traders reported 75% cost reduction in testing. Direct peer-to-peer settlement eliminates correspondent banking intermediaries. The primary choke point for U.S. financial sanctions: compliance, sovereignty. Each jurisdiction maintains independent regulatory nodes. Here's the critical development. The Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, headquartered in Switzerland, withdrew from mBridge in October 2024. Translation: the Western institutional oversight disappeared, leaving mBridge as a China alternative payment system outside Western. Now, connect the dots with me. December 24th, 2025. Yen strengthens to 15-month high. January 1st, 2026, digital yuan interest activation. January 3rd, 2026, DU 100 hours.
Why is Amazon paying me $600 a day? Because I use Amazon AI.
Operation Absolute Resolve executed 48 hours. Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave us the clearest articulation of what this was really about. On CBS Face, The Nation. January 4th, 2026, he said, and I am quoting directly from the transcript, or the blockade on sanctioned oil tankers, some of which have been seized by the U.S. remains in place. And that is a tremendous amount of leverage that will continue to be in place. until we see changes that not just further the national interest of the United States, which is number one, but also that lead to a better future for the people of Venezuela. Read between those lines. National interest number one, not humanitarian concerns, not democracy, not even the drug trafficking narrative. National interest, economic interest. On NBC Meet the Press, same day, Rubio stated, "This is the Western Hemisphere. This is our home, and we will not permit it to become a base of operations for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States." Who are the adversaries? China, Venezuela's largest foreign investor, recipient of 80% of oil exports. Russia, strategic partnership signed October 2025.
So there you have it, folks. You're seeing that he's laying out from a timeline standpoint, certain series of events that's taken place, the steps that the United States are taking to protect their interest. Now, their interest is in being able to control countries by way of SWIFT and sanctions and things of that nature. And any country that tries to deviate from doing that, from allowing America to control their way of transacting with other countries, becomes a threat to that country. So now they were trying to influence by way of regime change, by way of conversation, by way of peer pressure to get Maduro to fall in line with America's way of doing things. When Maduro was defiant and decided that he was going to do things his way, the United States said, well, look, we're not suggesting this anymore. We're telling you this needs to happen, because it sets a precedence. If Maduro was able to defy the United States, create a system that bypassed their sanctions and their SWIFT system, and now other major oil producing countries can now see that as a precedent and then themselves set their own similar system to bypass the United States interest in controlling by way of sanctions and things of that nature. So something had to be done. That went beyond diplomacy. It went towards flexing military might, right? To show not just that country, but also the adversaries working in cahoots with that country, that we're willing to pick up arms to protect this interest that we have of being the world controlling superpower that can slap a sanction, change your SWIFT, stop your ability to transact and do business with other countries. And we're not playing about that, especially in countries that are close, what we consider in our backyard, that are close to us. And so whenever we feel that you're overstepping that boundary, military persuasion is on the table.
Providing NAFTA through barter arrangements. The adversaries are the architects of the alternative payment system. President Trump's Mar-a-Lago press conference on January 3rd removed any remaining ambiguity. We built Venezuela's oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill, and the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And came this line, we're going to be taking out a tremendous amount of wealth out of the ground. And that wealth is going to the people of Venezuela and people from outside of Venezuela that used to be in Venezuela. And it goes also to the United States of America in the form of reimbursement for the damages caused us by that country. Reimbursement for damages caused by nationalizing their own oil industry. This is the doctrine. Challenge dollar dominance in energy trade and military force becomes an acceptable enforcement mechanism. Now, let me show you what leverage actually looked like on the water. Operation Southern Spear wasn't a surgical strike. It was the largest naval deployment in modern Western Hemisphere history. The command structure operated from Joint Task Force Southern Spear, headquartered at Naval Station Mayport, Florida. Coordinates 3023N81 to 26W. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's most advanced aircraft carrier carrying 4,000 sailors and 75 fighter jets. The USS Uwima, Wasp-class amphibious assault ship centerpiece of an amphibious ready group with 2,000 Marines from the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, the USS San Antonio, and USS Fort Lauderdale San Antonio class. Transport docks, 15 sporting vessels, including destroyers, Coast Guard cutters, and the Special Operations. Mothership MV Ocean Trader Aircraft Package F-22, Raptors from Langley Air Force Base F-35s, EA-18G Growlers, MV-22B Ospreys, CH-53E Super Stallions, AH-1Z attack helicopters. Approximately 15,000 troops deployed to the region, with 5,000 forward positioned at Puerto Rico bases, coordinates 18 to 60T60. This wasn't counter-narrow terrorism enforcement. This was economic warfare through naval interdiction. Marco Rubio.
You're not bringing in that much troops for a law enforcement operation. We're just being honest. What he's saying is just by mere size and the scale of military personnel used, it showed you the intensity and the urgency that the U.S. felt to take this step. And it's also possibly the reason why you don't see a lot of uproar in Capitol Hill about the actions Trump took. It's not a rogue action that Trump took to go get this guy. It's not like these politicians are in disagreement with the steps he took, because they too, beyond Trump, Joe Biden's, the Obamas, the Clintons, they also saw these people as a threat to the interest of the de-dollarization, the ability of the U.S. to control the SWIFT system, and they saw that as a threat as well. So this was something that they all think needed to be done because it is in the U.S.'s interest. The superpowers that controls the U.S. feels that any country that is subverting the system that was set up is a threat to that country. So when they were showing that military might, this was not a small operation. He's pointing out, by way of listing out the troop counts, the scale, this was a serious thing that is not, like a surprise to the officials in power. This was a concerted effort to really make a statement globally. Again, the narrative has got to serve a certain thing to create some moral reasoning behind why this needed to be done. This is about drugs. This is about human trafficking. This is about all these other things. The professional officials can't come out and say, no, they were trying to subvert our system that we set up to have countries transact with each other and trade and transfer money and things of that nature. And so because we were feeling like they were de-dollarizing us and making our system insignificant and irrelevant, then we had to go in and essentially slap them around a little bit to let them know that this is not going to happen. They're not going to say that. They can't say that, right? Everything has a narrative. And there's a lot of life lessons with things like this, is that in life, a lot of times the reason you see the narrative that's given isn't the actual reason. It's just the PR reason that was tailored to explain something that would be hard for anybody to accept or understand. So there has to be some sort of narrative that paints it differently than what it actually is. And so this man, which I think he did brilliantly, is explaining the real reasons behind why certain things happen. There's a lot that can be extracted from a presentation like this, is that you do want to be in the know to understand how one thing connects to another thing, because that's then how you can use that information in a wise way to hopefully better your life, or to be informed enough to make better decisions that will support and protect your family. For me, this is not a criticism. Obviously, I'm not condoning another country usurping another country, but I do follow the precepts that is biblically written in the Bible that says, in all you're getting, get understanding, meaning don't just understand the surface level of a matter, but drill down to understand the core and the base reason for that matter. And then all other verticals can be explained once you understand the core reason. And so for a lot of people who just don't know any better and who heckle and who will personalize it, this is, even bigger than Trump, right? It's about how the U.S. feeling we're being subverted, our authorities being subverted by these countries who we've already put in the naughty section. And now they're trying to find systems around us. And if they succeed at finding systems around us, all the other countries that are subjected to our system may comply with their system, i.e., the whole BRIC system that's existed. That's an alternative to the existing system. And so the more countries that sign up to do the BRICS programs, they're in a way turning their back on the existing system, right? And so if you're a part of the original system, you're going to say, wait a minute, you're not supposed to turn your back on this system, and you're going to find ways to now exert your authority. And if that means we got to go to war, we got to now bring out the guns. That's one of the reasons so much money is spent on defense, is for things like this, right? This is how, power is held. But it also gives you some insight as to how the U.S. sees itself in the global field. It's no longer able to move around unaverted, if you will. There are rising powers that are challenging the dominance of the United States. And because it feels threatened, it's now taking these steps to rebalance the order of power. And so it's good to be able to uncover that.
Described it explicitly as designed to paralyze the regime's revenue generation, not drug interdiction, revenue generation, oil revenue. Let me walk you through the specific tanker seizures with names, dates, and coordinates. Date, December 10th, 2025. Vessel type, very large crude carrier, VLCC. Location, off the coast of Barcelona, Venezuela. Approximately 10-degree weight and 64-degree 22W. Here's what makes this seizure particularly revealing. The vessel deliberately manipulated its AIS transponder data, broadcasting a false position near Guyana, offshore 550 kilometers away, while actually anchored off Barcelona. The skipper had been sanctioned since 2022 for Iranian oil trade. It was loading Venezuelan crude at Jose Terminal Destination Cuba with a scheduled arrival of December 17th. The boarding team, elite Coast Guard Maritime Security and Response Team, 10 Marines, 10 Coast Guard personnel, Special Operations Forces, supported by 2 Navy helicopters. Current status, as of early January 2026, anchored off Galveston, Texas. The cargo had not yet been seized, pending separate legal proceedings. Date, December 20th, 2025. Pre-dawn operation vessel. Type Panama-flagged VLCC IMO 9263 Owens. Location east of Barbados, Caribbean Sea. International waters approximately 13 to Grand 58 to GRA region. This is where the escalation becomes undeniable. The Sentries was not on the U.S. sanctions list. This represented a fundamental expansion of interdiction authority. Cargo 1.0 is 0 to 1.1 million barrels of Venezuelan Marais crude bound for China. The vessel had loaded under the alias Crag as part of Venezuela's Shadow Fleet operations. Boarding Coast Guard tactical team with Department of Defense support. Current status under U.S. control navigated to Texas. Think about what this means. A Panama flagged vessel not sanctioned carrying oil in international waters seized by U.S. forces. The legal justification, the cargo originated from Venezuela and the United States, decided that constituted sufficient grounds for seizure. Pursuit began late December 2025. Attempted interception, December 21st. Last known location, as of January 3rd, 2026. North Atlantic Ocean heading northeast between Iceland and Great Britain towards suspected destination Mormon, Russia. Approximate trajectory, 60 to 65 degrees latitude, 1020 of longitude, based on the Iceland-UK gap routing.
Can my dad go from XL to M with walking by Halloween?
The Bella 1 had been previously designated for Iranian oil trade and was registered under Russian protection. When Coast Guard forces attempted boarding, the crew refused the order, executed a sudden U-turn, and fled into open waters. On January 2nd, 2026, one day before Operation Absolute Resolve, Russia filed a formal diplomatic request demanding the United States cease pursuit. Venezuela dispatched Navy vessels to escort tankers, but Bella 1 had not yet entered Venezuelan waters when the pursuit began. As of the intelligence dossier date, January 5th, 2026, the pursuit was ongoing. The Belle 1 was heading toward Mormon, Russia. Coordinates, 68, DAR 58N 30 Doom 5E with the U.S. Navy, still tracking boat strikes and counter-narcotics operations, 30 plus small vessels. Destroyed casualties from boat attacks, or 105, 115 plus people, killed tankers physically, seized 2 Skipper Sentries, tankers under active pursuit, 1 Bella or 1 tankers designated for sanctions. December 30th, 31, 20 to 25, 4 additional vessels shipping companies targeted 6 entities. On December 30th to 31, 2025, just days before the military strike, the U.S. Treasury designated 4 additional tankers and 6 shipping companies for sanctions. The entities included Cornell Limited, registered owner of Norddar Tanker, Crepe Myrtle, Co. Ltd. Ship Manager Do, operator of Nordstar Aries, Global Investment Ltd. Registered owner of Della and Valiant Tankers. The economic impact, look at the trade volume collapse timeline. October 2025, 1,132,000 BPD production, 880,000 BPD exports baseline. November 2025, one that is 140. 2,000 BPD production, 921 BPD exports peak pre-blockade. December 1st, 15, 2025, 1,121 BPD production or 950,000 BPD exports pre-blockade levels.
Numbers say it all. He's showing you with charts and verifiable information what's happening pre the blockade versus what's happening post the blockade. So now you understand with every action, there's a cause. The cause was these contracts being set up, these barter systems being set up, these systems being set up to avert United States control in how countries transact with each other. And because it was effective, now different steps had to be taken to now rebalance the order of power. And so the US would block and seize the oil, the natural resource that was coming out of that country, because essentially it didn't align with the power structure, and they don't deem it to be within their interest to allow such a thing to take place. So these are the effects supported by the numbers.
It's maintained. December 16th, 31, 2025, 963,000 BPD production, 500,000 BPD exports blockade, effect 46% export collapse. January 2026, projected 800,000 BPD production, 200,000 BPD exports. By late December 2025, 80 tankers were stranded at Jose Terminal. Coordinates 10 13 64 D37W. Storage tanks and floating storage vessels filled rapidly, forcing PDVSA to cut production at oil fields to prevent operational shutdown. The only active exports, Chevron shipments, approximately 100,000 barrels per day with special U.S. license. Everyone else blockaded. Now, let's forensically analyze whether Operation Absolute Resolve was counter-narratism enforcement or petrodollar defense. The official justification centered on 3 pillars. 1, drug trafficking. Maduro, accused of leading the cartel of the Suns, designated as a foreign terrorist organization in November 2025. 2, human trafficking, Venezuelan migration and Tren de Aragua gang infiltration. 3, illegitimate government, U.S. recognition of Edmundo Gonzalez as rightful president. The legal framework FTO designation, plus the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, authorized military action without congressional approval as defense against actual or imminent attack. Now let me show you the evidence that this was primarily about the dollar. The DD.
So you see, he just laid out the 3 reasons why the U.S., the narrative that's being used, the U.S. is using the drug trafficking, human trafficking, and illegitimate government reasoning to justify in the public eye why military action was needed and why something needed to be done. But in actuality, it's just about money. It's about not just the oil, which is sort of low-hanging fruit. That's also something. We just want to take the oil. No, it's not just taking the oil. It's a deterrence of creating a system that bypasses the SWIFT. The de-dollarization thing is the big play here. Venezuela had the gall and the nerve to try to subvert a system that the United States set up that benefits the United States, that keeps their system of power in play. And if they were successful at doing it, it would create a precedence that would allow other oil controlling countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and all these other countries to subscribe to and to create other systems that would also subvert them, thereby removing power from the United States' ability to control countries through by way of sanctions and by way of restrictions, by way of blockades and things of that nature. If that precedent went through, the US in a way would cease to exist in terms of its superpower abilities as a major controlling country. So not just the oil, we're talking the dollarization, meaning the fact that everything that's transacted is being used as the dollars used as the basis for those transactions. And the dollar is seen as a valuable currency because it's backed by oil, which is a natural resource that everybody uses. So Saudi Arabia, being a major backer of the US dollar, if other oil producing countries were finding ways to de-dollarize the standard way of transacting by creating these dollarless systems where no money's actually exchanged, it's just a barter system. You know, this is a loan that will be paid back with this resource. We didn't trade any money. So now that dollarization system is irrelevant. Doesn't matter. And they, in a way, bypass the system and makes the United States control small and irrelevant. It becomes business as usual. If that becomes the major standard for the world to follow, we're in trouble. That's how the people who's controlling our country sees it. We're in trouble. So to shut that down, we're going to now not only threaten, not only bully, not only do what we need to do, but now we're going to step in with blockades to show you how serious we are. We're going to start seizing that nothing's going to leave this area because now we're going to blacklist you. You can't do nothing. Using this de-dollarized system, you can't transport anything. You can't barter. You can't do nothing. And when we take over the oil, we're going to reinstate our dollarization system, which means you can go to the marketplace and buy it for whatever the dollar value of it is. So the attempt to subvert is now quashed, right? And now you have to subscribe to the system we set up, or you won't do business, or we're going to push this button right here, and it can go up from there. That's essentially what he's saying, is that this is about money. Most people don't know it.
Dollarization timeline on 2017. Venezuela officially abandoned dollar pricing, began accepting yuan, euros, rubles. 2018 launch of Petro cryptocurrency, BRICS, membership application, exploration of CAP's payment systems. 2019 PDVSA began exploring Russia. Is SPFS payment system a SWIFT alternative? 2023-2024 PDVSA mandated USDT tether payments for new spot oil clients. May 2024, China, Concord Resources signed rare 20-year $1 billion investment deal for Venezuelan oil fields. July 2024, Venezuelan central bank selling $119 million in crypto monthly. December 2025, 80% of oil revenue collected in USDT dollar transactions effectively eliminated. January 1st, 2026, digital interest payments activated. January 3rd, 2026, Operation Absolute Resolve executed. Venezuela began a dollarization in 2017-2018. If this were the sole trigger, intervention should have occurred earlier. But here's the response to that timing question. U.S. tolerance had limits. The activation of interest-bearing digital UAN on January 1st, 2026, and Venezuela's BRICS membership push represented escalation beyond a containable threshold. Historical pattern recognition. Multiple analysts identified the pattern immediately. Iraq, 2000. Saddam Hussein switched oil sales to euros. Invaded 2003, Libya 2011, Mohammed Gaddafi proposed gold-backed dinar for African oil trade. NATO intervention 2011, Venezuela. 2018, Maduro switched to yuan crypto. Military intervention 2026, The pattern analyst assessment challenged the petrodollar lose your regime expert consensus within 24 hours of the strike. Independent analysts converged on the petrodollar defense assessment. Thai academic Vorpak, January 3rd, 2026. Venezuela has served as a testing ground for trade outside the dollar system, including oil sales to China and Russia, alternative currencies, barter arrangements, and cryptocurrency. Bringing Venezuela back into traditional trading channels would help the United States counter de-dollarization by shutting down one important front Indian economist, Sandip Pandey, boss of capital. The reason behind this attack is to ensure safety of the petrodollar regime. Multiple financial analysts consensus framing as petrodollar defense operation. Senator Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, Senate Intelligence Committee ranking member, provided the geopolitical context. The long-standing efforts by the U.S. to demonstrate it is not a colonial power in the Americas have been completely disregarded. The administration's goal of controlling the Western Hemisphere could provoke China and Russia to pursue similar actions in their perceived spheres of influence. The quantitative stakes, Venezuela's proven oil reserves, 303 billion barrels, representing 17 or 20% of global total reserves. Daily oil revenue at November 2025, peak 50, which turns into $60 million per day, 746. Zero. BPDX 6580 barrel annual revenue at peak production of 20 billion China is total investment since 2007. 60 plus billion with $12 billion outstanding debt. As of December 2025, by December 2025, the dollar exclusion rate reached 99% alternative payment. System adoption included CAP's network of 3,300 plus banks across 103 countries. Ambridge 23. Central banks testing claims of 75% cost reduction for Middle East energy traders. USDT cryptocurrency adoption, 80% of Venezuela's oil revenue. The limited impact counterargument. Some analysts argued Venezuela produces only 1% of global oil supply, 960,000 BPD versus 100 plus million BPD global consumption, making market impact minimal. But here's why that misses the point entirely. Strategic significance lies not in volume, but in precedent. If the holder of the world's largest proven oil reserves successfully exits the dollar system and establishes operational alternative payment infrastructure, other producers, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Russia, Iran, gain legitimacy and tested infrastructure to follow. Saudi Arabia's participation in Enbridge, while not yet representing full commitment to Petron, signals openness to alternatives. This represents the most significant crack in petrodollar foundations since the 1973 oil for-oils agreement between Nixon and King Faisal. The drug trade counterargument. The cartel of the Suns in Trinidad represent genuine security threats. This is factually accurate. But these criminal networks existed for decades without triggering regime change operations. The timing coinciding with peak derization, digital UN interest activation, and Enbridge operational status suggests economic motives took precedence over law enforcement objectives. Let me give you the forensic bottom line. Primary motive, petrodollar defense, high confidence assessment. The preponderance of evidence indicates Operation Absolute Resolve primarily aimed to restore U.S. dollar dominance in global oil trade by eliminating the Western Hemisphere's most advanced dollarization experiment.
There you have it. I mean, there's no better way that could be put. This is about reestablishing the dollarization system that was trying to be subverted. That's why he's got to call so many troops in. That's why it was such a major operation. That's why it was all hands on deck. This is about the power structure that the U.S. tries to protect. It's like a 90% confidence rate that's what it's really about.
Supporting factors, strategic signaling, demonstrates U.S. willingness to use military force to defend dollar hegemony.
Absolutely.
Chinese containment eliminates China's largest oil supplier in the Western Hemisphere. 80% of Venezuelan exports flowing to China. BRICS disruption prevents Venezuela's 303 billion barrel reserves from joining the anti-dollar alliance. Ambridge delegitimization discredits alternative payment systems by destroying their showcase implementation. Counter narrow terrorism justification served as legal framework and public relations cover. But economic objectives, restoring dollar-denominated oil trade and eliminating Chinese and Russian financial infrastructure drove strategic decision-making. Confidence level 85 to 90% had alternative hypothesis probability 10, 15% that counter-narratism genuinely motivated the operation, with petrodollar benefits being fortuitous secondary outcome. The global order shift operation Absolute Resolve marks a decisive U.S. assertion that dollar dominance in energy trade constitutes non-negotiable national security interest. Military force remains an acceptable tool for economic objective enforcement. Western Hemisphere resource control supersedes sovereignty norms. Alternative payment systems like CIPS and mBridge represent existential threats requiring kinetic response.
Okay, so the bigger message here being sent, the U.S. will not care about your sovereignty, who's in charge, who's not in charge, if you're trying to subvert their dollarization system. That's what he just said, right? It supersedes the perception of this democratic system and democratic elected leaders and all of that stuff. They don't care about that. If you're trying to change the order of business, where you're diminishing the system that they put in place to control everything, you are an immediate threat and therefore have to be subdued, militarily or otherwise. And they're going all in. I'm talking from seizing oil tankers and all these different things. Like, the message is, don't try this again. Don't come for this. Don't even think this is something that's going to go unanswered. That's the point here. And that's why you see a lot of countries up in arms, because the U.S. is not releasing control of the thing that gives them power. And it's really about the dollarization process, because that puts them at the center of everything. So I love this, because to me, in all you're getting good understand the real reason why things are happening. Not just the narratives, but the real reasons why things are happening. It's a level of critical thinking. And for most people, they don't have the time to dig in and to connect that dot to this dot to that dot to this dot. And when you can have a program that essentially simplifies it for you in ways that it can be consumed so that you understand the real reason. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean there won't be any further attempts to bypass that. The whole cryptocurrency and why it was such a scare is because it's a system that subverts a controllable dollarization system that governments control. So most powers are not trying to find systems that is going to make theirs irrelevant. So these things will result in steps taken to subvert those systems from ever coming into fruition.
The acceleration paradox. Here's the irony that should keep dollar defenders awake at night. While Operation Absolute Resolve, intended to deter challenges to the petrodollar system, military intervention may actually accelerate the global search for dollar alternatives by demonstrating the vulnerability of dollar-dependent nations to U.S. coercion, the urgency of payment system diversification, the reliability risks of SWIFT infrastructure subject to political weaponization, expected China-Russia response, strengthened and bridge development and expansion. BIS withdrawal.
So what this is saying is that in their attempt to subvert other systems from emerging, they may intensify the efforts from other countries to do it, because now guess what? Every country is seeing the U.S. has this rigged system that puts them in power. And whenever, for whatever political reasons, maybe they like or favor a leader more than others, don't want something to happen, they will go through great lengths to prevent it from happening. Now, if we had a good perception in the eyes of these countries as being a fair, unbiased holder of justice, leader of democracy, that's going to erase that perception, because most countries are going to see us for what we really are, which is opportunistic, selfish. And if that's how they perceive us, they're not going to agree to keep things as they are. They will try to actively find ways to offload, which is why you see the increase in BRICS membership and BRICS applications, because countries are trying to find ways off of what we're doing. Now, if I'm just keeping it 1,000, everyone who plays a game tries to find their advantage so that they can ensure they win. And The U.S. created the system. They just want to make sure that their system's always in place because it gives them an advantage. I don't know anybody who wouldn't do that, right? So you can understand just playing, you know, the middle ground here. You can understand why they are going through such great lengths. So I'm not faulting them for doing what they do to protect and keep their power. But at the same time, it's going to change the image that other countries have of them. So this is not to criticize that, because clearly they've been doing this for years, but it's also to note that because these things are being done in the open, it's hard to control the narrative around it, which is now going to bring attention to it, in which may ultimately have an unwanted effect of countries racing to get off the system as fast as possible. So,
already removed Western institutional constraints, CIP network growth and Prosper UAN settlement promotion, support for sanctioned oil producers, Iran, Russia, potentially others, via cryptocurrency and UN infrastructure, BRICS alternative financial architecture acceleration. The post-Maduro forecast, near-term 2026-2027 U.S. lifts blockade permits Chevron expansion. Oil production recovers to 1.5 to 2.0 million BPD within 18-24 months. Dollar-denominated trade restored for U.S. destined exports. Chinese purchases continue but face pressure for dollar settlement or 25% tariffs. Medium-term 2028-2030. Major U.S. investment 30+ billion rebuilds infrastructure. Production potential 2.5 million BPD Venezuela. Rejoins dollar-based oil trading system. OPEC quota. Complications as Venezuelan supply returns. Alternative scenario low probability. If political instability persists, or if the installed government resists U.S. terms, protracted occupation or secondary intervention becomes likely further destabilizing regional order, accelerating Latin American pivot toward BRICS and China. Ladies and gentlemen, let me leave you with this. On January 1st, 2026, China activated interest-bearing digital UAN. On January 3rd, 2026, the United States captured a sitting president. The mainstream media sold you the drug war narrative. The ledger tracked the data. 803 billion barrels, 80% cryptocurrency settlement, 99% dollar exclusion, 48 hours between yuan activation and military intervention. The numbers don't lie. The petrodollar system faced its most significant challenge since 1973, and the United States responded with the largest naval deployment in modern Western Hem. This wasn't about drugs. This was about the architecture of global finance. The question you need to ask yourself: if the United States required military force to prevent Venezuela producing 1% of global oil supply from exiting the dollar system, what happens when Saudi Arabia, UAE, or other major producers make the same calculation? Enbridge is operational. CIPS connects weapons losing 300 banks across 103 countries. Digital UN now pays interest. The alternative infrastructure exists. Military force delayed one defection. Can it prevent them all? Here's my question for you. Do you believe the United States can stop dollarization through military force? Or has the digital UAN and Enbridge already reached the point of no return? Drop your analysis in the comments. I want to know where you stand. If this data changed how you view the Venezuela intervention, subscribe to the Gray Ledger. We don't follow narratives, we follow numbers.
I think this was done masterfully. Very informative. I would definitely recommend that you guys go follow this channel. I certainly am a subscribe member at this point. And stay connected. For those who's not connected, I ask that you like, subscribe, and share the video, but also to weigh in, leave your comments, and share your thoughts. All right, until we speak again, God bless you, and good day.